This is episode 101 of the After Gambling podcast. In this episode, I am joined by Jody Bechtold, CEO of the Better Institute, internationally certified gambling counselor, licensed clinical social worker, and just overall expert in the field. Hey there, and welcome to the After Gambling podcast. You know me. My name is Jamie. I am a former problem gambler. Now I do this little podcast to help other people to just shed some light on problem gambling, disordered gambling, whatever we want to call it. It's the same thing. We all know it when we see it. And today I am really excited to have our guest on today, Jody Bechtold, who I have long appreciated and respected. And just overall, whenever I hear her speak, I'm just like, yeah, that makes sense. And as you'll hear in the episode, Jody understands this because she's been around. She deals with it on the front lines and now shares all of the things that she's learned over the years. Now, specifically today, I asked Jody to come on to share for parents. So this one, especially if you're listening to this is going to be helpful for anybody, but especially for the parents of those that are struggling with gambling, or if you're just worried about your kids and you're worried about their interactions with gambling as kind of a preventative thing. You're going to be able to kind of go back in time, or what the parents would like to go back in time, and maybe start to address some of those things in a preventative way, because Jody talks about the mistakes that we sometimes make, accidental mistakes as parents that we don't realize start to lead to things that ultimately can culminate in a gambling addiction, or really any addiction for that matter. So I think you're really going to appreciate this. And like I said, excited to share. Always love hearing Jody speak at conferences. So it was great to have some one-on-one with Jody Bechtold. Hello there, Jody.
Hey, Jamie, how are you?
I'm fantastic, my friend. And I appreciate you doing this because this is a podcast episode I've been thinking about doing for a while. And so when we met a few weeks ago again, and we're discussing it, I'm excited to share, especially not just with the people that are working to work through their gambling struggles, but also friend and family, because there's so many friends and family members that listen to the podcast. So I think you have a ton to share on that topic.
Oh, that'd be great. Yeah, thank you for the invitation.
So I guess we'll start off by saying that I see you as truly one of the experts. The word expert gets thrown around a lot in all spaces these days. But obviously, if you could share a little bit of your background, because you truly are an expert, and you're one of the people that whenever I hear you talk, which happened about a month ago, again, I was like, wow, she gets it. So what has helped you to get to this place, like your background?
Well, yeah, so I'm a licensed clinical social worker, currently in Pennsylvania, hoping to be able to go past Pennsylvania borders eventually. The pandemic has helped us move forward in our thinking on that. I originally started after my master's degree working in substance use disorders in outpatient setting. And Pennsylvania then was doing expanded legalized gambling about 2007. And I was like, oh, that's kind of interesting. I'll learn a little bit about that. And I thought it would be this really short wave that I'd ride and, take a training or something like that. And it became this thing that I was like, oh, this is where I belong. And I have never looked back since. I have dedicated all my clinical time to understanding gambling disorders and working with family members and loved ones. Some of the certifications I have, you can't even get them until you've done 2,000 hours with individuals and family members. So it takes a long time to get some of the certifications that I have. And, with again, the expansion of gambling, the latest one that you guys just experienced in Ohio with the sports betting. Whenever you have sports betting, you also have online. So that was the last wave that hit Pennsylvania about 4 years ago. And we got really busy and we have never slowed down. So there's a lot to be said for sports betting and online that's even reaching a new type of gambler, I guess you could say, that maybe wasn't asking for help previously.
Yeah, and I think it's that 2,000 hours really that gives you the expertise, right? I mean, obviously you're well beyond that now, But part of that along the way, like you start to see trends, right? Like you see a client come in and you're working through something, and then another one and another one. And eventually you start to see these things where you see the patterns. And that's me as a marketer, I always look for patterns. So
Right.
that's where I think, especially a couple of weeks ago, and we can just dump right in. You were talking about in your presentation, the failure to launch group, which this was not a new
Yes.
concept to me. It's something that I kind of picked up as a trend. And even going back to like all the GA meetings I would go through. I mean, GA talks about like what are the characteristics of a person who's a compulsive gambler, and it's inability and unwillingness to accept reality, emotional insecurity, immaturity, all these things that kind of have this Peter Pan syndrome, which I can
Hmm.
use myself as the guinea pig here because they resonate with me. And it was so
Hmm.
much of it was me at 21. And so when you said that, I was just like nodding my head. I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to get Jody on to talk about this.
Yeah. Yeah. The failure to launch. I mean, I've always loved that movie with Matthew McConaughey, Terry Bradshaw. I thought that was just so funny um, because they hit so many key things, but did it in kind of a humorous way. Um, Failure to launch is something that not even with gambling is something, I've seen in my clinical practice, but I didn't see it as much as I have recently, again, with this sports betting online, expansion that's happened. And, just talking with my colleagues, I was like, are you seeing this? Are you seeing, just kind of understanding a little bit more. And because we do actually have so many more people that come to our practice for gambling, we were able to see these trends faster than maybe some other people that maybe only have a handful of people on their caseload at any one time. I have up to 80 to 90% at any given time are gambling related. So the other striking thing about the failure to launch that I noticed was that for many, they're very that the whole family is what you could say well-to-do, or the parents have made it their focus and their mission to make sure that their children have a better life than the one they had. And so the failure to launch is kind of, accidental because the parents have been trying so hard to make a better life for their children. And then they lose track of time that their children are now 24, 25, 26, 27, and still living at home, that type of thing. So it was really interesting when we were preparing the presentation for the conference and talking about, family, to look at my caseload over the last couple of years and be like, wow, there's quite a few on my caseload that I worked with the parents, or the parents reached out to me first. And I got better at saying, can I ask how old your child is that you're asking about, inquiring for help? Oh, 26 or 28. And I'm expecting, 15, 14, 18, something like that. I was not expecting, later 20s. So again, the failure to launch really stood out in this new way, more than I'd seen in previous years.
Yeah, and it's such an interesting thing because it is, as parents, we want our kids to be more successful. And
Yeah.
it makes sense. Like, and friends, we want our friends to be successful. And so you do these things and you kind of try to create an environment. And you're right, like it's a lot of times kind of middle class, upper class is where I tend to see it most.
Uh-huh.
Even, I mean, even if you start people that don't have much, like they still want that same thing. And there's this universal
Yeah.
thing, probably around the globe, that we want our kids to do better than we did. But unfortunately, like that has side effects if we let that go on too far, or if we protect our kids from failure. And that's
Yeah.
a trend that you see like kind of outside of like the gambling sphere, like people talking about like eighth place trophies and all of these other kind of things that we've built
Right.
into our society, which in one way you look at and you're like, wow, this is really good. Like you reward kids for effort, you encourage them to keep trying, you keep them involved. But at some point, you also have to accept the fact that like you have to highlight, okay, when things aren't working, when you're not being successful, then you need to have a new strategy. And so it's really kind of a side effect of love, which makes it probably difficult to unwind.
Uh-huh. Yeah, absolutely. Well said. People do not, try to, keep their kids, from growing, from develop. I say developmentally and chronologically, your age has to be the same. And when it's not, then you're developmentally and chronologically out of sync. All right. And so parents aren't trying to keep their kids out of sync. They're trying to do things to what they think is helping, when unfortunately it's not helping. It's delaying the growing and the experiences that their children need.
And then do you think that we kind of look at the people closest to us? And I mean, if our friends or our friend group are doing the same things we are, we kind of assume that it's normal and we don't necessarily look outside of that. Like, is that kind
Sure.
of sort of the hang up that, well, all the other parents in the group are doing the same thing, but they don't go outside that to see?
I mean, it could start that way, especially, if it starts when their kids are high school, or if they're in organized, um, you know, sports or clubs or anything like that. Then they're seeing a lot of people around them, and role modeling to each other. What's interesting is when um, kids go off to school and then they come back home. What I've seen is this push or this belief to let them live at home so that they can save up their money as a way of, because that maybe is what the parents did, save up their money to then be able to kind of fast track, maybe buying a house instead of renting first. Any of those, types of things to say, how do we set you up to succeed, when really setting up to succeed translates to failing to launch, right? So the exact same intent creates failing to launch in some individuals, and others, they actually are set up to succeed. I think, when you look around, it's funny little things that, seem innocent. The phone bill is my favorite example, right? Everybody's on the family plan. And it just makes so much sense to stay on the family plan. It's cheaper. But then what happens when you're 24, 25, you are thinking about moving out, you have a career, you're working, 9 to 5, what have you, and your parents are still paying your cell phone bill. And so you don't even, like, you never got used to paying that bill. It was never a bill to you. And then, the parents are still paying it because they're used to paying it. They don't even think anything of it until they meet somebody like me. And I'm like, do you pay your own cell phone bill? And someone says no. And I said, do you pay your own car insurance? No, that's on the family plan too. Um, what do you pay for? Right. And start to find out that many of our monthly expenses, the parents have been still paying for. You don't pay for internet? No, because I live at home. They have no bills. Right. And so it creates, what you would think is, oh, you're able to save a lot more money. But to many, it's no, I'm able to spend a lot more money doing anything that I want, whether I'm going to the bar that's the favorite bar club of, in my city on the weekends, and spending a lot of money on drinks. Definitely gambling, anything I can do on my phone, because I have so much disposable income, because I don't really understand the value of money, and I don't know how to save. And my parents think that by covering all those expenses, they're teaching me to save, but they're really not. They're just teaching me that I feel like I have a lot of money in my new career since I got out of school. So there's
I think
a lot there that, that parents don't realize that they're doing. And so it's harder to get them to see and, break it down, unpack it, and say, you're not helping your child anymore. You're hurting your child.
I think that cell phone
Yeah.
example is such a perfect one, because it is. I mean, financially, it makes sense. Why would I have split it up and you're going to pay more? The kids are going to pay
Yeah.
more to be on their own, and it as a family, it just makes sense. Oh, we'll keep you on. We'll keep you on. But it takes away what is a very small expense and a very real expense, an expense that the kids want. They want that phone. They want to be able to text their friends. They want to be able to watch videos on YouTube. They want all the accessibility and kind of the freedom that phone gives. But it would be a great opportunity. Yeah, it doesn't make financial sense, but it makes perfect life sense to cut that cord and to say, okay, this is something you can take on.
Yeah. And even if you don't split up the family plan itself, the child needs to have to pay the parent every month without the parent asking. Because, you know, they've got to get used to saying, oh, I've got to pay my bills every month.
Yeah, earn that, basically learn that discipline and learn that
Yep.
habit to make sure that things are done. And there has to be a penalty if they don't do it, I would
Right.
imagine, because there's penalties in the real life. And I can see how,
Right.
I mean, it starts with a cell phone, then it's, oh, we're going to pay for these lessons for the sport, or we're going to pay for the books, or you name whatever it is. And then all of a sudden, as you said, they don't have the reality of what their life cost. And so they go out, they overspend, or the first time they are on their own, and now all of a sudden those bills are shoved on them. It's almost like a tsunami of bills, which you can imagine, like, now it feels crushing. Like, it's like, oh my gosh, where are all
Yeah.
these bills coming from? I'm not used to this. I thought I was signed up for the salary, and I was expecting I was using that to figure out, okay, I can live a very nice life doing the things I thought I could in the past.
Exactly.
But now it's like, oh crap, mom and dad, like, there's all these bills. And so they run back and ask for even more help, I would imagine.
Yep. Yeah. When the work that I do with many of my clients, obviously involves setting up a budget. And so, I mean, I have people that are lawyers, they're accountants. Um, and I'm like, let's set up your monthly budget. And they're like, I'm not really good at that. I'm like, what? Right. So being able to give them a budget that has these categories, and they are like, I don't really know how much I spend going out with my friends. I'm like, you don't? Like, not on a monthly basis? No. So you just look at your bank account, and when money's in there, you just spend it? Yeah, pretty much. Right. And so it's the financial literacy skills are not there.
Do you sense that it's an emotional issue, that, like, because on the surface it's like, put your money out there, like, it either adds up or it doesn't, but it's kind of
Hmm.
the emotional response and the emotional I guess reasoning behind, like, okay, if it doesn't add up, then you got to address things. And that's what I sense. I mean, because, hey, I've not always been great at putting together a budget, and it is that it's like, it logically makes sense, but it's like, do you want to get into the emotions of what your finance means, what your work means, and what that equals in things you can afford? And I think that can be difficult for people to unpack, or it's kind of scary for people.
Yeah. So when we're talking specifically with gambling, absolutely. Um, by the time someone comes to me, there's already been an event or two that are, pretty devastating to that individual. And so then when I'm like, okay, we're putting all of this on a spreadsheet, not only your budget, but who do you owe for gambling? What credit cards did you use to gamble with? That's really hard for people, even when they do understand money. So it's even more challenging when the whole concept of money comes in, money goes out. Is new to someone. So then we'll do the whole spreadsheet, and then I'll just kind of say, let's just sit here and breathe for a minute, feel the feels, as I always tell people. And a lot of it is, the embarrassment, the shame, the I'm educated. My parents have been so good to me. How could I have done this? And so there's a lot of emotion wrapped around money. I mean, money for all of us has emotion of some sort. Some people have a healthy relationship with money. Some people don't. They view, some people view other people having nice things as a negative thing. So there's all kinds of emotions that go with it. But in my book, the one thing we always put a quote at the beginning of every chapter. In the finance chapter, the quote is, "Money is supposed to hurt when you spend it." And everybody can just pause for a minute and think about that. Money is supposed to hurt when you spend it. People would slow down and make better decisions on a more regular basis if they kept that quote front and center in their mind. And that would address some of the emotional to it.
That's a fantastic quote.
I know, I love it.
Yeah, I mean, because it is, and it goes beyond just gambling. Like, obviously it's completely applicable to gambling, but it goes
Mhm.
beyond it, which is, and that's so many times we try to solve our financial problems with gambling problems, or we try to solve our emotional problems by shopping. And when you think
Yep,
of, like, okay,
exactly.
what was it? And that's, we detach ourselves from what it took to earn that money and what that money means. And so if you do, it should hurt when you spend it. That's it's a
Hmm.
fantastic little.
And then, but you have a whole generation that really never used cash. Everything was debit. Everything was now, the apps on the phone, the Venmo, the PayPal, the Cash App, and all of those, do not hurt when you spend, like pulling out your wallet and handing over a 20.
Yeah, there's something to the physical detail,
Uh-huh.
like handing it over that it's gone, as opposed to just kind of the digital side of things.
Yeah. I mean, think about even just, going to, I guess a hotel is an example, staying overnight at a hotel and you get your bill. You never really, you had a credit card on file, and you don't really ever see it. But could you imagine going up to the counter and having to put, money down to pay for your hotel? Like you'd really think twice about how many nights you stayed or which hotel you picked to stay at. Like it would really make decision making, slow down and be much more purposeful.
It's so true. The other thing I'm thinking is just back to like the money and guilt, because you're talking about like you feel
Yeah.
bad, like your parents, like they taught you well, and that's where like this is not, it's not just coming from a successful family. I would think that money guilt, I could see the same thing. Somebody that comes from not much, they look and it's like, man,
Mhm.
we didn't have much, so like me wasting money, like it feels extremely painful. And on the other end of the spectrum, you have, hey, I was set up, I was given the perfect opportunity, I should be successful, I had everything put in front of me, and so you have that guilt when you can't
Mhm.
handle your money well. So it's not specific to any one group. It's like different. I would imagine there's different trends within those different kind of economic levels of families.
Absolutely. And, the guilt is because one example or one reason would be because they just really didn't understand the value of money. And especially with gambling, how quickly they spent money kind of in a trance-like state. And so we're talking like not small dollar amounts
Right.
that people have spent. 23-year-old, spends $40,000 of his savings that his parents thought he had, was saving. And, at 23, they had paid for his college, so he didn't have a student loan, like all these things. And he had no frame of reference for what 40,000 really is, how long that takes to save and how fast you can spend it.
Definitely. I guess on other signs and symptoms, obviously we've talked about some of the money stuff.
Mhm.
We've talked about obviously the bills, like not splitting up bills, not having the responsibility. I imagine another one is like when parents call you, are they the ones initiating the call? Are there other signs
Yeah.
that parents should be kind of mindful of to say, okay, like am I dealing with kind of a failure to launch uh, issue? And then we'll get to kind of some of the best
Yeah.
practices for
Yeah.
addressing it a little bit later.
Yeah, again, when I do an evaluation, sometimes I have had the parents that will meet with me because they can't get the child, well, the adult, to meet with me, so they're meeting with me, and I'm gathering all kinds of information. Examples include, not only just reaching out to me, but do they schedule their child's other doctor's appointments, annual physicals, things like that? Yes, they're just on top of it. If they have any type of prescription medication, the parents are on top of it, making sure that they never run out of their refills. Um, uh, all the annual bills or, things like that that might come through. Car insurance, sometimes people pay every 6 months or a year, not monthly. All of that's taken care of. Getting the car inspected, parents take care of that. Like you can just look at almost anything that is date driven. And I find that with failure to launch, the parents are still managing all of those things. They're managing the calendar of sorts with all of that. And it's really a disservice when you think about it, because then the person has a lot more time to keep doing the things they like to do. And then they get to keep not having to do all those adult things, right? That come with being an adult. We don't get to just have, our favorite flavor of lollipop be our biggest decision of the day, as little kids get to. So, just even thinking of any of those examples that are date driven, that we, as functioning adults manage and stay on top of, or sometimes don't stay on top of, and then realize what happens, the consequences of not staying on top of it. If parents are still handling all of that just because that's what they've always done, it's absolutely not helping, launch into adulthood successfully.
Yeah, and so all these things add up over time, right? And it's kind of all these contributing factors, the parents holding on to things, the kids not taking some of those responsibilities across all areas of life, and it just builds and builds and builds. And obviously we get to the point where all of a sudden gambling enters the mix, and that becomes a problem. And now we have this combustible situation where the parents look and they say, hey, we did everything for you. We laid it out in front of you, kid. And look what you did to us. Look at how you paid us back. And the kids have the kind of, they're looking around and they're saying, well, this is the first time. And all of a sudden I have this huge epic failure. Like the first time they fail is like this incredible one. So I guess we can start to shift into how do we start to unpack that? I mean, this is obviously where you and the Better Institute comes in. I think you have an amazing like setup and philosophy on this. So kind of walk us through, I mean, parents, kids that are in that situation, like what are those next steps that they need to take when kind of all hell breaks loose?
Yeah, I mean, there's probably different paths. Parents sometimes reach out because they can't get their child into therapy. And so working with someone like me, that's the goal, is let me help you. If I can't help your child, I will help you so that you can start to make the shifts that are necessary, that create enough, I hate to say it this way, but create enough pain for the adult child to say, okay, fine, I'll do what you're asking me to do. And that works really well because, as you know, from the talk I gave, we talk about kind of first order change and second order change. And first order is everything, functions within the rules that are already set. And obviously it's not working if the rules are, set and you're operating within that, and the adult child doesn't have to go to therapy, they're gambling, anything like that. So I work with parents to create second order change, which means change the rules. And that when you change the rules, the whole system has no choice but to also change. And, so again, each situation would be very unique. But some of the areas are, how do you set up that your child now has to pay for all of these things? These different bills so that they don't have as much money to gamble with. How do you sit down with them and say, we have a contract now. You're going to have to start to prepare to move out. I'll give you 3 months, 6 months, whatever. All of a sudden the adult child's like, what? I have to move out? Yeah, you're going to have to move out. And those types of things, that anything parents can do to successfully launch their child into adulthood is what we're targeting. And, so, anybody listening to this episode really just kind of think, what does successfully launching into adulthood look like? And then you reverse that and say, what changes do I need to make so that is the ultimate outcome? Maybe they need to pay rent at home until they move out. They have to start assuming bills around that, for the house, or contribute. They have a monthly amount they have to contribute. They have to go do their own grocery shopping. And I cannot tell you the number of people that don't know how to grocery shop. And then they say, but if I grocery shop, that means I'm going to have to cook, and I don't even know how to cook. Well, those are all examples of, failure to launch, that if we reverse them and teach you how to cook, teach you how to grocery shop, you have to clean, you have to do your own laundry. That's what it would look like when you are successfully launched into adulthood. And so when it's also including gambling, I think it's really important not to solely focus on the money. And it's such an easy one to measure. It's such an easy one to talk about, but it can't be the only area that is focused, because then it becomes this kind of power control dynamic that is actually not a healthy one to get set up. Because when people are trying not to gamble, I sound like I'm talking in circles, but we really don't want them to have access to their own money, but we want them to be responsible for their money. And it's a delicate balance to have parents not take over, right? They have to learn how to be involved, but not control it. And so, again, each situation would be very unique, and we would kind of problem solve based on, the ultimate goal and, kind of what is the financial damage and how long has it been going on. But again, how do you successfully launch your children into adulthood? When you think of what you want that to look like, what are the things you're currently doing today that are not helping or actually going in the opposite direction? So I know that's a long answer.
It's the right
one way.
It's complicated, right? Like we need these long
Yeah.
answers, and that's the value. I mean, obviously, podcasts and long form is we can go into some of these and obviously you working one-on-one. I mean, because we can talk about generalities here, but until somebody gets in and works with someone like you on their specific situation, it's always going to feel once removed. And that's why, like, in a way, like as I'm listening, I think parents, spouses, I would encourage all of them, like, hopefully your significant other, your kid wants the help. But it doesn't matter.
Yep.
Like on day one, the moment that you recognize this as a problem, like you personally should start doing all the things within your control, right? It's the serenity prayer. Control the things you can control. And they can control reaching out to you, reaching out to a professional to start working on the things that are within their side. And in a lot of ways, I think it also puts more pressure on the kid or the spouse to then start to own it up to it. Because when mom and dad say, hey, here are the things where I messed up. And I think there is you got to balance that, I imagine, with a balance of empathy and understanding while also taking ownership of the things where, hey, you could have done things better. And you don't need to guilt yourself over it, but you got to acknowledge the fact that, hey, I understand some of these things are because we tried to set the situation. We screwed up. We had we had what we thought was a good plan. It just didn't work out. But going back to I think it's imperative. I would encourage everybody. If you're dealing with someone that's struggling, you need the help because like you're part of it.
Exactly. And, that as you're talking, I'm thinking, parents that reach out to me and we have a session, I'm able to see which parent has been trying to, set their child up for success and launch them successfully. And maybe the other parent hasn't been, and it might just be subconscious. But between the two parents, in the household where there are two parents, there's one of them that's usually has to make some painful choices, and there, hasn't. Maybe it's the empty nest fear. What are we going to do when we don't have our kids to focus on? I loved focusing on my kids. Family was everything. If I successfully launch them into adulthood, they won't need me. So there's a lot of that going on between, some parents and the launching. I think of others, maybe it's they only have one child, right? So an only child that struggles to successfully launch because they've always just been a unit, and it feels odd to launch the only child. That might be the scenario. Or another one, there's lots of children, and some of the children just launched on their own and some didn't. And was there some precipitating event prior? Did they was the person that's not launching, did they have a mental health diagnosis early on that the parents have always, kind of coddled them? Did they have an injury or something like that? Did something happen early when they were children that they've always just, really gone much more soft on that one child as opposed to the other ones? That's another way to look at, how to help the parents with, in those situations. And again, then you just compound it with the gambling. Well, he's had trouble when he was a teenager with some mental health issues. And so, we want to help him now. And it's not his fault with the gambling, right? And you kind of hear this same approach to almost not letting their child experience all the things they need to experience, and not taking responsibility for their own, mental health, their own addiction, anything like that. it really makes it very difficult for that person to even think the parents believe in them, that they are going to succeed in life, right? So that they're giving a different message. So working with the family, able to kind of change some of the rules, change the stance, make those hard decisions is imperative. And sometimes I'll be kind of funny because I do know this is hard. And I'll say, okay, so you don't pay rent. You don't make them pay rent. You don't make them pay cell phone bill. They don't have to pay internet. They don't have to pay grocery, food, shopping expenses. They don't have to pay their car insurance. This is amazing. When do I get to move in with you?
Right.
And they start laughing, realizing, oh, that does sound pretty funny, And
Yeah.
so being able to kind of, add a little bit of humor is helpful in some of these, what feels like very dark times for families and loved ones.
Yeah, and the humor, it just lightens it for everybody, right? They know that you're not
Yeah.
just going to sit there and try and attack them, but yet you understand. And
Exactly.
I've always seen addiction as something that really happens a lot of life changes, right? When you start to see people, it's like something changed in their life, usually a pretty significant event, some kind of death or a new job or moving. Like it just seems like that trend. And so for parents, it's pretty obvious that this is a huge life transition. You talk about, I mean, there's different types of failure to launch, but ultimately it is, you're looking at, and all of a sudden you are going to be an empty nester. And that's a scary time, I'm sure. And I just look at my own situation. My mom was my preschool teacher and we were very close all along. And so I absolutely believe she probably didn't want me to grow up. And so like she wanted to protect me and just kind of like that was scary. And yet fast forward, and this is where sometimes it helps to look at other people's examples. She loves being a grandparent. And like that's a stage she wouldn't have gotten to if I wouldn't have ever launched into having kind of an adult life. And so, but it's kind of similar to gamblers, right? Like we're seeking out this short term, we're protecting this short term thing. We're going to ignore the long term, the investing and protecting our money, but it's because we're trying to seek this like short term return. But we gotta have to let go.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And I'm thinking, another example is I've worked with parents initially to then do family sessions with their adult child that had a gambling problem, or I've met with parents one time and said, if you want me to work with your child, you can't work with me ongoing because that would be a conflict of interest. And so then they would shift over to another therapist and make the changes, the second order change. Then the adult child contacts me. I start working with that person, really target the gambling, get into the finances, really focus the whole treatment plan and goals around, successfully launching into adulthood and getting developmentally and chronologically back in sync. And then doing some, family check-ins every once in a while, and inviting the parents into a session to report, kind of how things are going or what other changes. And it's really helpful because it shows the whole family's in therapy. It gives people the space to express how they're feeling, the anger, the frustration, the embarrassment, all of those things. And then over time, it gives the family the opportunity to see that the changes were necessary and that they can start to have and redefine that relationship with their adult child in a better way, just like what you're describing. But that doesn't happen overnight, right? And it really requires everybody to kind of get in there, hang in there, and do a little bit of the hard work so that everybody is at a much better place, down the road.
Yeah, and that's I think why it's important not to just look at this as a financial issue, because if you just look at it as a financial issue, and that's what I see with a lot of parents, and I was kind of the loved one, friend, family member at one time, and I saw it, and my friend, I'm like, oh, it's just a financial issue. Here's a budget. Put your money in these envelopes, and
Right.
we'll be good to go. And it was so much bigger. Like there were other issues, and that's where when you can do that family counseling, because then you're treating the entire environment, which all of a sudden now it has roots not only in helping with the gambling problem, but I imagine with just the relationships in general, and to end up a whole lot better when you can get everything out on the table, talk through it with somebody that's trained to do these types of things, to get to better strategies and better outcomes.
Exactly. Yeah. I think of one family in particular. the goal was really to help him move out after he had stopped gambling. And the parents really struggled with that because they wanted to go to look at the apartments with him, and they thought they had a say in what his apartment was going to be like. And I kept saying, no, you don't. He's going to live wherever. But what if it's not nice? But he needs really nice furniture. Not really. No, he really doesn't. Right. Let him, get out there and figure it out, and let him buy the wrong size bed and realize that he can't fit it in the
The sheets don't
apartments
fit.
that you're right, because he bought a king size and it won't fit or something like that. Like, let him, but, and I'm like, no, he's got to experience this. He's got to feel this. And they really struggled. They were just so conditioned to prevent something from happening, that they would over explain why they were involved and why this and why. I'm like, just let him go. And well, but what if? And I said, he's the type of person that sometimes he does need to run into the brick wall in order to say, oh, there's the wall.
Yeah.
And they're like,
we all do. That's how we learn.
Yeah. And you're okay with that? I'm like, I'm really okay with that. Right. Like, what's the worst that's going to happen kind of thing, scenario. And it's really just they're uncomfortable because they think that it's preventable. And not all things are preventable if you're successfully launching someone into adulthood.
Yeah, that's a great point, that you can't protect from everything. And that's some of these things you just have to learn by touching the fire and feeling it.
Exactly.
The other thing that stood out to me one time, somebody reached out to me and we were talking back and forth, and they said, I realized my parents don't believe in me. They don't think I can actually do it on my own. And they were from a very successful family. And that was the first time it really come on my radar that, oh my gosh, but it completely makes sense. When somebody's just doing everything for you, the kid all of a sudden looks at it and the parent thinks, man, I'm doing all this great stuff. They're going to be thankful. And that the kid is resentful because they're like, they don't think I can do this on my own. That's why they're doing it. And that's something I don't think parents are aware of. And I don't, that's another one that I just think it's a lack of awareness. They don't see it that way.
Yeah. And, so much of this is, just so subconscious or unconsciously happening because they're in it day in and day out, or it worked that same way of, treating the child when they were younger, or another child, a sibling worked. So why doesn't it work with this one? Right. And you got to remember every single person is just a unique individual and has their own, kind of makeup. And when parents apply the same formula to all kids equally, it's not going to work out for one or two of them. Right. And
Definitely.
the resentment, and which, think about it, gambling would then be like, I'll show you, look what you can't control.
Right.
It's one thing you can't control, and it's gambling, whether I gamble or not, and how I do it.
Do you ever see kids that get into gambling because their parents specifically told them not to? Is that a thing? Or is it more just
Think
subconscious?
so. Yeah, I think it's really, I'm trying to think of how to say this. Some of the things that I've seen is that when somebody grows up, their childhood is, not of well-to-do, not of a lot of means. They might say to themselves, when I grow up, I'm never going to live with this kind of scarcity. And, some will say, I'm going to make sure I go to college and I have a really good job. And they, they have this, view of the finances are going to make their life happier. And so we'll see a lot of that when people are telling their stories, that they had some sort of scarcity growing up, or the parents might have been very restrictive with money. And so again, it's an unhealthy relationship with money. So then when they start to gamble, they have an early big win, or they feel like they're really good at it. And it always seems to come in handy with some extra funds right when they need it. They then start making bigger bets. They have even more money until they don't, right? Because that's part of the progression. But it came from this image when they were younger, something about the family's relationship with money, or their, just kind of how they were, the circumstances that they were living in, that made them value money so much more, that when they start gambling, they value gambling money even more. Right. And that's part of that distortion that happens. So I wouldn't say that, they purposely go against their parents, but it could just be that they said, when I grow up, I will X, Y, and Z. And that kind of how it manifests for some people with gambling and, early wins.
That completely resonates with me. So I always joke, my mom was the coupon mom on TV. Like if there was a show in the 80s and 90s, it would have been her. And we lived, off of one parent working teacher salary. We lived well. We never went without things, but we were very much kind of
Right.
lower middle class. But she would, and she was always looking for ways to save. And that was forced in a lot of ways. Like we needed the ways to save in order to do the things that we did. And so I do definitely, as I was gambling, some of those things you do, and whether it's gambling or in work, we have the same thought of, I want to do this so I don't have to go through that, because you see that, hey, that's tough and it's challenging, and you didn't want to have to look at every coupon every weekend to make the grocery amount work. And so I can definitely resonate with that.
Yeah. And then you take the opposite where you grow up really, very fortunate, and you have no concept of money then.
Yeah.
Like, I talk with my my business partner, and his kids are in ice hockey teams, and that's a really expensive sport. And they're rewarded, by going, making it to the nationals or something like that, by having to go all the way to California. And I'm like, how do people afford this? Right. And what do these kids see? They just see, hey, I was on a great team and I got to go to California and I got to do this and I got to do that. But they don't realize like how much money it costs, and how hard it is to keep somebody in an expensive sport. Right. Because they have no frame of how hard it is to save money to provide like that. And so that's a great example going into adulthood, where they, really don't understand the value of money. And then the failure to launch might kick in, the family plans, of the internet or the cell phone and all of that, add to it. Right. And you just kind of just see, wow, this just happens slowly, but consistently over time. That the parent wasn't able to find the enough teaching moments and act on them to help their children understand and have a better relationship with money from an early age. So we could all say that we all have our own stories for sure. And I just think it's compounded now for so many because it's, money just moves so quick in this virtual world. And if that's your whole frame of reference, you're really actually set back a little bit from understanding the value of money, and money's supposed to hurt when you spend it.
Definitely. And that's that whole youth sports area. I grew up in that, our family did. And now it's on steroids. And you see the kids that are traveling. It's every weekend. And that's why I tell my kids, I'm like, we're going to do the local rec stuff. If at a certain age, you reach an age where it's appropriate to play on some of those teams, maybe we'll look at it. But it's amazing. My sister's a college softball coach. She's constantly telling parents, just put money in a 529. Like, stop traveling around. If you want to travel, and do it because you enjoy it, not because you're trying to get a college scholarship. And that's kind of a similar gamble in a lot of ways. A lot of parents look at it as they have to give their kids all these things. And it also creates this weird dynamic where the kids learn the value of hard work and discipline inside their sport, but they're so isolated by that they don't have to deal with the outside things. And so I think it's kind of like the four burners, able to focus on one specific burner, which is their sport and maybe their friends, but they don't have, to your point, like they don't have the financial burden of that. And so it really kind of messes them up when they get out in life, because they use those skills, which were really successful in one area, but they aren't able to, when those other burners turn on, it just becomes kind of too much for them to handle.
Yeah, exactly. And then, if you bring it back to sports betting and gambling, you take people that did really well in their sport, maybe even they did get a scholarship, they played at a university level. Then after all of that, so like think about your entire adolescence, you're defined by how good of an athlete you are. And then you're rewarded for it in college as well, because they make sure that, athletes have enough supports to get through school, and not, fail out of any classes, things like that. And then you graduate, and then what? Like,
Right.
what are you good at? You're good at sports. So then what do you do? Well, then you gamble on sports because you really understand sports. But you haven't really had the financial expenses and things of going to college, because you got the scholarship, you got kind of, stayed in your team. And so it's a real disadvantage for people who are athletically, skilled. When they launch into adulthood, they're definitely developmentally and chronologically out of sync, because so many things were done for them, or they were always in a team. So they had a coach that was telling them. Then they become, in their 20s, what kind of career do I want? Because I got a 4-year degree. I don't know. And then they really just spend so much time, betting on sports, because it's so fun to them and they're good at it. And then they probably go online, and then the hook happens really fast, because everything online is, it's just devastating, and they're completely lost. They're like, how did I get here? And had no, so sometimes we unpack that with just what it was like to go through high school and college in a team environment, family environment, coach always telling you have really good discipline. You can get through anything. You learn the adversity because you're on a team. Somebody always has to win, somebody always has to lose. You can train really hard. You can, get through injuries. You can do all these things, but how does that actually translate to successfully living an adult life? And there's a big gap. And so we work with a lot of people that were very good athletes at some point in their life and became, crippled with sports betting and gambling.
I feel like you were just talking about me specifically, but I know you weren't.
No.
And I was the athlete, and but I also had the academics. So my college was paid for by an academic scholarship, and I was a
Yeah.
walk on to the golf team. But I had those two things, and I lost my identity at the end when the sports ended, and then the biggest one was the fear, and that's where like kind of this failure to launch, like it's a failure of accepting fear into your life and understanding risk and understanding that you're going to fail. And I learned that in sports, but it's different when it becomes financial and it becomes, what are people going to judge me? And I think just the 20s are such an influential time in our life where we're all trying to act like we have it together. And yet nobody has it together. Like nobody knows what they're doing in their 20s.
Right.
But that fear is really, and then like you said, you get into gambling of any type. For me, it was poker. And there's that belief that at some point you're going to figure it all out. And that's the one hook with gambling, is the gambler's convinced to the very last minute that at some point they're going to get on a hot streak, get back to even, and nobody will have to know just how bad it got along the way. And it's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Quite
Right.
one last question on parents,
Right.
transitioning. Do you see gamblers isolating parents much? Because that's something I did, and I see that it seems like it would make sense that like where one parent understands and is kind of helping the person through or doing what they feel like is helping, and the other parent is left completely in the dark or knows very little about what's going on. Is that common?
Yeah. It is common, and I would say it's common with all addictions. It doesn't have to just be gambling.
Okay.
It's kind of what addiction does, right? Secrets keep us sick is the slogan that's really used. And so you'll find that whatever that dynamic is currently, there's history where the child maybe, went to the one parent more often, or knew they could get over on them easier. And so that just carries through to something devastating like gambling. Examples would be that the one parent bails out the adult child, pays their rent or pays off a gambling debt and says, don't tell your father, don't tell your mother, kind of thing. And that, all comes to light when they can't keep it a secret anymore. So again, the parent is trying to help, which enable, the definition of enable means to help, but enabling them to stay sick is what they're doing. And they don't realize they're doing that. So that splitting dynamic is just what addiction does. And then the enabling is also part of what addiction, feeds off of. And so we'll see it in different ways, but it's easier to hide with gambling than with other addictions for much longer. And, bringing the parents together and really having to understand everything that's happening, almost like an honesty session, is usually recommended to help everybody, all start at the starting line together moving forward. But because those secrets are really, really devastating.
Absolutely. So hopefully this is giving some actionable stuff already, because I think if we talk about these things, that's really, I mean, I'm sure there's a bunch of parents that are going to be listening to this, or spouses that listen to this, and they're going to be nodding their head just like I am along to it with all these things.
Right.
So, and I'm a firm believer that we can learn and we can grow, and we don't have to kind of plod along alone in these things. And that's the value of doing a podcast. The value of reaching out for help is that you expedite the process. What have you seen that are some of the things that you see work the best? What would be your suggestions if there are like a few things to start off with, or what would that roadmap look like? And I know it's going to be individualized person to person, their situation, but are there some bigger patterns that you've seen? Like, okay, these things really seem to work well for a lot of people.
Oh, it's a tough one. Because again, most of the time I interact with people when the gambling's already, too much to ignore. And so what I see, I'd love to say there's some things that are preventable, but it's mostly making sure that you are, setting your children up to launch successfully into adulthood. Really looking at all the things that you might be doing that you think are helping your kids, and question yourself, challenge yourself. Are these really helping? Kids, the best thing that kids could do is, have to pay for certain things. Even when they're teenagers, they have to get a job, all of that stuff. I think of, if you go to the store, whatever store it is, if your kids always assume you're just going to buy everything, that's a sign, right? Have your kids kind of question when they're at a store, like, are you buying me these clothes, or do I have to buy these? Is what you want your kids to always be wondering. If we go and, we get our nails done, do I have to pay for my nails? Or are you paying? Do I need to make sure I cover the tip? Like, you always want your kid to be thinking, what's my part in this? And then the parent gets to say, no, I got it this time. Or sometimes, nope, I don't know. You buy whatever you want when we're in the store. I'm not buying for you. And that is such an easy thing to start when, kids can work while in school and just have a part-time job, because then they're really understanding that it takes a long time to save money, and money spends really fast. Then as you fast forward into adulthood, if you're letting your kids stay at home after college, what's the plan? It can't just be, well, whenever they decide they're ready, right? It's got to be something like that. So there's a couple of things for anybody listening. Just really, how would you set your adult child up for launching into adulthood successfully? What does that look like? And then just, back into it and help with some discipline. But being involved, and the way that you're involved is different from controlling or doing it for them. So, check yourself in terms of what involvement looks like for you, would probably be another way I would answer that question.
Those are all great tips and thoughts. Do you have many people reach out that, I mean, they wonder if their kids have a gambling problem, and they're kind of like looking to you to provide that answer? And I guess, what are some of the keys that you would throw back to somebody if they're listening and they're like, how do I, and I guess then the transition question is, how do they bring it up? Are there suggestions that you have on how they would broach that topic with their kids?
Yeah, most of the calls that we get, they know there's a problem, but they don't know what to do about it.
Yeah.
Is usually where we go. It's different than what should I be? It's because by the time people reach out to someone like me, prevention is not the key. That's too late for prevention, right? So I would tell any parent, if you think you have a child or an adult child that's gambling, You do not have to play detective. You do not have to become skilled. Just reach out to someone like me that's trained in gambling treatment and talk to them, because you'll be able to start to make some shifts that will help your loved one, stop gambling sooner if you make those shifts. When parents think that they've got to figure it all out and they've got to do all of these things, but they don't know what to do, they don't have the support, the person with the gambling problem usually wins in the end, because they know what's going on. They know how to hide it. So yeah, I would tell parents, definitely reach out at any time and talk to someone trained like me, because it's so much easier to help someone before the devastation is severe. And then everybody gets better faster is kind of is the way I look at it. It's almost, there's some things that are so avoidable. But with the amount of gambling that is happening across this country, there's I don't know what is avoidable anymore related to gambling, because it's just everywhere. I mean, even universities are partnering with gambling operators in the industry and normalizing it, but the universities themselves aren't even prepared to handle students that have a gambling problem. Right. So it's really interesting time. So I always just say to people, if you're not sure, just go talk to somebody. That's the best way to get the answers and get on the right path, is to go talk to someone.
Yeah, and you can put together those decades of experience to highlight the mistakes that other people have made or the loopholes that the gamblers have. There's somebody I was
Yeah.
talking to once, and he said, you know what, I think my mom is I've exhausted all the ways that I can get around the system that we've put in place, and she's finally on it. But she wouldn't have had to go through that on her own, right? And that's the thing, the beauty
Right.
of reaching out and getting the help from you is that you know how gamblers think. You understand how they're trying to think 2, 3, 4 steps ahead. And sure, this sounds good on the surface and it sounds like a good plan to the parents, but that's where you could step in and say, but what have you thought about? How are you going to address this if it happens? And that's really, if we're trying to fast track this, so we get to a good outcome as soon as possible, the more insight that they can gain from a professional like you, I think the better. So I think that's great advice.
Yeah, totally. And, I mean, I've met with several parents over the years, but only for, a handful of times. It's not like, go talk to someone and then you're in therapy for years. You literally can get a lot accomplished in, a half a dozen sessions. So it's money well spent, and everybody, there's insurance, there's treatment money out there, there's all kinds of ways to get the help. So don't let the shame and the stigma and the embarrassment keep somebody from reaching out.
And all they have to do is go to betterpractice.com and they can start to see how they could work with you. And obviously you have such a well-connected, you are someone that trains therapists on gambling.
Do, yeah.
So like you, as I said in the beginning, like you are the expert of experts. And so if nothing else, they reach out and I'm sure you could connect them if you aren't able to help them with somebody else. But this has been fantastic. There's been so many insights, and I just hope that this creates kind of a mix of calm and action, where there's the calm that, okay, there's somebody out there that can help me, that can guide me through this, but it also takes that action to get on a track that it's not just trying to do it on their own. Because I think that's a mistake that most parents make is, well, this is something, there's the embarrassment, there's the shame. We don't want other people in the community to know about this. And so they just try to treat it in-house. But getting with someone like you, they're going to expedite that process and get to a better outcome so much faster.
Yeah, well said. Thank you.
Anything else that you'd like to add? Because this has been fantastic and I appreciate all of your time.
No, I mean, I could go on for hours. Again, this is my passion and I love, helping people that are impacted with, gambling. Probably just tell parents, give yourself some grace. Every parent is going to make some mistakes along the way. And it's not about being perfect. So give yourself some grace and, figure out how to change the rules so that your children launch successfully into adulthood.
Jody Bechtold, you are the ultimate pro, the ultimate expert, and as always, appreciate your time. I learn something every time I get to hear you speak. So thank you so much for all that you do for me and for everyone else in this community.
Thank you, Jamie. Really appreciate being on the podcast.
Thanks again for tuning into the After Gambling podcast. Now, today we did have an expert on. And if you want to reach out to an expert, I can think of nobody better than Jody and her team at the Better Institute as a great place to start. And you can check them out at betterinstitute.com. I'll put that link in the show notes. But reach out, see if they can help you. I know with telehealth, they're able to expand the borders beyond Pennsylvania. So that's a great place to start. And if not, I'm sure they can direct you to help in your state, or you can just go on and look and search to find the licensed professionals within your state that understand gambling addiction and can help you, whether you're the person that is the gambler or the family. And I think that's such an important thing, is that we need to get help and treatment for the family members, especially those parents as well, along the way. Otherwise, remember, I'm just a guy with a gambling problem, so take this for informational purposes. Anything that I say on this, I'm sharing my insights, but I'm not a trained professional. So please get that professional help from Jody or someone similar. Finally, music for the show is Something Elated by Broke for Free and is licensed under the Creative Commons license. Thanks again for tuning in, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.